Alright guys, I just thought I would come on here and do one of these discussion type things that I seem to do a lot of these days. There's a lot of trouble at the moment going on in parts of Ireland, and there's ongoing issues with illegal immigration in England and across pretty much most of Europe, really, besides like Poland, Hungary, and a few other European nations. But for the most part, immigration, mass immigration, illegal immigration is something that's causing a lot of issues across a lot of, and not obviously not to mention America as well. We've all seen what's going on over there in the past few days, which is very worrying, to say the least. Because, what's happening in America, what's happening in Northern Ireland is, to me, the writing's on the wall, really, as far as England's concerned. We know that, we know at some point, we know things are going to escalate, we know things are going to get to a crisis point, a real tension, a filled period where I think just any sense of unity is just going to gradually break down, I think. It's been, I was talking about immigration and, well, and yes, of course, there are a lot of good things about legal immigration, but as far as mass migration, unchecked mass migration, and especially illegal immigration, there is, I think, really it's just one of those situations that you just can't be tolerated. You've got to put your foot down at some point. You have to say, I mean, this is just not a feasible situation. This is just not a, well, first and foremost, it's not a, it's a breach of, national security, really. It's a breach of trust between the people that live in England or Ireland or wherever it's happening. It's a breach of trust between those people and the government, because the government is supposed to be there to protect those people that are there legally and are paying their taxes, and especially people, really, in my opinion, especially people that have been there for generations. Their families who fought in 2 world wars. It's like it's like, to me, that is where, first and foremost, that's where the loyalty should lie. But really, to anybody that's in the country, law-abiding, paying their taxes, and just not being a nuisance to society and respecting the law of the land, kind of things. Like, I think that's, to me, it's just really disgusting. It's really just quite, it's just quite, it's just, sometimes I don't really know what words to say about it. It's beyond shocking. It's malicious, is what it is, and it's deliberate, because there's so many hands involved in this. NGOs, charities, government officials, the gang smugglers have probably somehow being paid by somebody high up, probably to, or it's probably an indirect. I'm sure it's probably a lot of it's indirect, but it's, you know, it's essentially been turned into a cash cow, hasn't it? Really, it's become essentially it's become a business, really, and it's being exploited. And you know, and I'm not saying for 1 second that there aren't some people that are coming across on boats that might genuinely want to live there and to try and make a life there, and to you know, what need a fresh start kind of thing. And but and probably do that. You know, they probably are running from problems in their own country, and I get that, I understand. But at the same time, you know, it's like you are coming illegally and you are breaking the law. So you know, I'm sorry, but it's like if I went to any nation and tried to enter their country legally, well, one, I would face the full force of the law in whatever country I was in. Now, whether that means a death sentence, whether that means, I don't know, honestly don't know, but could be a death sentence, could be, you know, a lengthy period in prison. But I would imagine for the most cases, it would be, you'd probably be fined and be deported and probably be banned forever being allowed to come to that country again. And that would, I don't think that would be wrong, you know. But in England, it's like, oh, well, if you come illegally, you know, it's like everyone takes pity on you, even though they don't even know the full situation, the full story behind why you're going. You know, and I think that the reality of it is that the vast majority of these people are opportunists, really. You know, they're just. And the thing is, it's like you do have to, you know, I know everybody says the same thing, but you do have to ask yourself, well, you know, where is everybody else here? Like, where are the other people? Why is it always like, why is like 99% of these people men of a certain age, and like, where's their partners, their wives, their children, you know, their grandparents? Like, well, we never see these people. Like, it's always just it's usually of a certain age, like what, 30s, 40s, 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s. But I'd say probably the vast majority of them is somewhere between 20 and 40. You know, there's just too much of this sort of self-righteousness bullshit that goes on in the middle classes and the do-gooder types in England. You know, there's too much of this performative empathy bullshit going on. It's like, but really deep down, it's just that they don't wanna feel guilty about turning these people away, and you know, potentially any kind of repercussions happening because of what happens to when they get deported. It's like, well, that's not our problem. You know, if these people are willing to break the law and come across the English Channel, which is, you know, essentially more or less a death sentence if you come at the wrong time of the year. I mean, really, it could, you know, it's a treacherous journey anyway. Really, you shouldn't be doing it. It's, you know, an active shipping lane. You know, it can be the sea can be unpredictable, and it's just illegal, isn't it? So, but yet somehow they just keep getting away with it. Like, and you know, the government says that they're gonna crack down on the gangs and, you know, try to you know, forge some kind of a relationship with friends to try and, you know, kind of persuade them to stop, to try and get them to stay in France or go elsewhere. But of course, the French authorities, they don't want them. They're not interested. You know, why would they want to tolerate them? They don't want them. So it's easy. It's easier for them to just pass the buck onto Britain and let them deal with it. You know, let them deal with the ills of, you know, illegal immigration. You know, people that we have no clue about. And I've talked about illegal immigration a few times on my channel, but you know, it's got to stop. We all know that it has to. If it doesn't come to an end legally, then at some point some group of some sort will come about and they will sort it out themselves. You know, and then things will escalate. Then, you know, things will turn into unrest, and before you know it, the military will be called in to deal with it. So it's like why don't they just do it now? And the thing is, it's always there. It's always like this with the the so-called powers that be. It's like they often wait years or decades to sort things out. It's usually only when things get to a point where they get so bad that they've got no choice to. It's like, well, why? It's like, why don't you do it before it gets to that point? Surely that's more logical, isn't it? Surely that would be a better. I mean, sure, that's the wise thing to do, isn't it? But it's ultimately it's just about money. The government, they don't give a shit. They don't care about the local people and the areas that are going to suffer from, little cliques, little community, little sort of sub community kind of cliques that are going to form, and like I've talked about before, people, because obviously with these people, most of these people being illegal because they've got no documents, we don't know anything about them, more or less. I mean, apart from probably where they've come from, they can probably, most of them can string together a couple of sentences about where they've come from, whatever. But then again, it's like, we don't know for sure. But for the vast majority of them, none of them have got documents. It's just like, what a coincidence, how convenient it is for you to just not to arrive in a country that you're not allowed to be in legally with no documents that tells the authorities in England where you're from. Strange, that, isn't it? And even if they did have documents, it's like, well, could you really trust them? Would you trust them? I don't think I would personally. If you're willing to break the law, you're willing to do anything and say anything, as far as I'm concerned. And the thing is, it's like the people that are allowing this, people in charge of protecting our borders and our ports. You've got to ask yourself, well, is somebody being paid off here? Is somebody higher up? Do they know that they? Sure. So I think the amount of people that come in via lorry and things like that and ships, it's like you'd think to yourself, well, how are these people getting into the country? Like, how, are these border force agencies, what we'll call them, the port authorities, are they turning a blind eye to it because they don't want to deal with it, because they don't want to lose the jobs because they're fearful of being labelled racist or xenophobic or something? It's like, I mean, it's fucking ridiculous, utterly ridiculous. But who knows? That might be the case. I honestly wouldn't be surprised to hear if, at some point, see the news where, somebody's been tipped off about, some border force agency officials, basically turning a blind eye to all this stuff. So, and the thing is, like, why do we, just to me, it doesn't make any sense, because we're supposed to be in a cost of living crisis, and yet, like, and services are having to be cut. Companies are going out of business, or companies are having to, like, really kind of become a lot more efficient, and so they're having to cut staff and cut their workforce, basically, reduce this their kind of their outreach across the country, by whether it's closing factories, stores, shops, whatever, offices. And it's just like, well, there's no money in the economy, and yet there seems to be it seems to be millions of pounds available to people that have never contributed a single dime into the system ever. And you have to ask yourself, well, why are these people being prioritized? Like, why are these people taking the top spot, kind of thing? Like, why are they why they're deemed such a priority over everybody else. And the only thing I can think of is that I genuinely believe the vast majority of people in government, they just look down upon the general public. They despise them, especially people who come from more middle class, upper class regions. They absolutely despise the working classes. Doesn't matter whether you've got a good job or a good career. It doesn't matter. They just despise you because of classism. That's I really believe it's down to that, and they would rather see those people replaced with immigrants, because in their eyes they say, well, yeah, but immigrants come in, they work, they bring this and that. It's like, well, yeah, of course they do, because they get everything handed to them on a plate. They get all the help and support they could possibly want, and they don't get all that classism bullshit. And they've already got communities set up in the country. They already had things established because people from the countries where they've come from have been there for decades. So it's like they fit in, don't they? They fit into their own little. It's essentially these people have already their descendants, whatever, relatives. They've already set up. They've already set up like subcultures, basically. And that's what the UK has become now. It's just become a series of subcultures that have dominated over everything else, really, over the last 50 years, let's say 40, 50 years. And I think if you ask the average Brit what their culture is, they probably couldn't even tell you, because they've been so brainwashed into believing that multiculturalism is everything that the UK is, even though it's clearly not. That they don't feel any sense of alignment to any sort of national identity anymore. I think they don't feel any sense of pride or belief in what England is anymore, what Scotland is, what Wales is, but especially mostly in England, really. I think apathy has really ground people down to the point where they just don't even. They would rather just be taken over. I think a lot of them at this point they'd rather just. They'd just rather not bother. They've been so utterly brainwashed by the media, the establishment, the local authorities, just so disillusioned with everything that they just don't believe in anything anymore. And while obviously a lot of those people don't like the impacts of illegal immigration on their communities, on the economy, and the overall sort of feel and vibe and image of the place that they grew up in, that was once a lot more, let's say, a more pleasant place to live, a more, there was more of a sense of community there at one time. They've basically just kind of just written it off. They just said, well, this is the way it is now. This is what this country is now. Which I think is very, very sad. I think it's a real shame that people have just given up. But I understand it. But as I said in my last video, it's when people don't collectivize, it's then, when people don't make a real effort to try and change things, it's like, well, other people make decisions for you. Other people give you the life that you don't want. We all know what how this is going to pan out if it's not dealt with properly. This is, and I've talked about it so many times. I'm kind of bored of talking about it at this point, but there's going to come a point where I think a lot of Brits are going to start feeling intimidated and a minority in their own towns and cities, whether it's 20, 30, 40 years down the line, whenever it is. But then again, having said that, the generation that's growing up now, they might have a very different stance on multiculturalism and, they've grown up in the people who've grown up in the last, say, 10, 15 years, and certainly people who are growing up now, they don't know any different, So, but then again, it's like you could say the same thing about people that grew up in England 50 years ago, 100 years ago. So it's, I suppose, it's all kind of relative, in different ways. But I mean, surely this can't go on forever. Surely there has to come a point where, I hate to use the overly used expression, enough is enough, but surely that has to happen, doesn't it? I mean, how realistically, how much longer can this continue to happen for? 5 years, 10, 15? I'm not saying we're ever going to have every single nook and cranny of the UK, tightly secured at every single second of the day, but forever. But the main points of entry, or main places where you could get access to the country, they need to be safe and secure. Secure, and it's like people like Nigel Farage have been calling for a national emergency, and I think he's right, and I personally think that's probably what will happen. Starmer, the Labour government will probably end up having to call that eventually, because they know that that's going to be a winning kind of ticket to the next general election. So they'll probably do that at the last minute, so they can secure, or believe that they're gonna secure, another 4 years or 4 or 5 years in office, whatever it is, in government. But I think they will be sadly mistaken. I really do. I believe that Labour have finished the next election. But anyway, I don't really want to talk about voting and so-called democracy and all that kind of nonsense, which is what it is, really. A highly corrupt system. The best thing that we could do to deal with this right now would really be for people of a military background to come together to form some kind of an allegiance and some kind of a pledge, let's say, to stop it, to really put an end to this. And they could essentially kind of give the government an ultimatum. Like, you have a deal with this situation, or we all go on strike. We will go on strike, because that way it's like, you're threatening to essentially let the country's guard down, really. So the government would have no choice. They would have to do it. They'd have no option. They would have to do something. And if it's not the military, then it's the general public. Maybe it's the border force that should go on strike. Maybe it's airport officials, port officials that should go on strike. And just express genuinely how they feel, what's going on. It's just like we can't go on living like this as a country. So it's too costly. It's too, the risks of this is just unbelievable. It's like we don't know what these people's backgrounds are. We don't know we don't really know where they've come from, what they've run in from. We don't know what their state of mental health is. We don't know if they've been involved in any kind of crimes or gang, if they're involved in gangs of some sort or other. If they've got connections to, seedy individuals in the UK for whatever reason, whether it's family or just some kind of connection there in the underworld, the black market kind of thing. Which is probably what it is. That's probably why a lot of them are coming, because they know they can, by throwing away their documents, they can get away with a lot of things if they, because a lot of these people just basically disappear into the country, and somehow they'll end up with documents somewhere along the line, fraudulent documents, and they'll somehow the asylum process will favour them for whatever, they'll make some excuse why they have to stay in the country, and that's it. They'll be there, then they'll apply for a right to, what's it called? I forgot the name of it. They'll apply for basically, residency at some point. I think it's after 5 years. There's so many people in the UK that just should never have been allowed to never have been allowed to come into the country ever. Just so many, just really seedy, dodgy, just morally bankrupt, just real scum of the earth. Really, some of them. It's all good and well, people coming to work in the NHS or to, supposedly fill, a lack of, to fill in areas of the economy that need, basically cheap labor. Well, that's all good and well, but it's like, but what are the cultural and societal and moral or ethical implications of both legal and immigration? What we now, 70, 80 years in? It's like, where does it end? Like, where do we draw the line here? On what grounds do we say, we just can't accommodate any more people? Surely there has to come a point where we come up with a figure, basically, and we say, let's say the country can accommodate maybe, I don't know, 80 million people, maybe at the most. I don't know. I don't know. I'm just guessing, maybe. Well, I don't know, but I imagine that there comes a point where, especially with the way that the economy is going anyway, with the rate of technology and AI and everything, automation progressing, as I've talked about before, but there must come a point where, economically speaking, it's just no longer rational to certainly allow any kind of illegal immigration to happen anymore. Surely, that has to happen. And as far as legal immigration, I really believe there comes a point where you just have to say, I think we just have to become like Australia. We say there has to be a cap per year. Of course, people are always coming and going. People are always leaving the country for whatever reasons, because they're going back home, or locals or native Brits are moving away, whatever. People are coming back into the country as well from abroad. But there comes a point where I think you just have to say there has to be a cap now. Like, I really just think we're just, we need to have a system that's, it's like, some people would say it would be unfair, but I think, maybe we have to have an incredibly strict system at some point. If you've got, and it wouldn't even just be that you've got a skill, or you've got a degree or anything like that. It's like, you would need to be somebody incredibly talented, somebody important, somebody, I don't know, it would have to be some people that would have to have business ideas, entrepreneurs, people like that. It wouldn't just be enough to allow people in with experience and skills in this particular job or career. It's like, there comes a point where surely you have enough people, don't you? And if not, it's like, well, you can't just rely purely on immigration to fill quotas and to get people into specific jobs or careers or sectors. It's like, well, this is what's happened. You see, that was the cop out. You see, that was the easier, cheaper solution, rather than actually training up local people. building communities for training and apprenticeships and job creation. Nah, fuck that. Let's do it. Let's go the other way. Let's just rely on cheap labor, and and that's what's happened over the last 30 years. And obviously everything else was done by people coming into work in the NHS or whatever it was, or caring, or whatever. Like the last few years, I think a lot of immigrants have gone into caring work and things like that. So it's like, I mean, even my sister, where she works, there's some Nigerians there working now. I think they're doing some kind of admin, and apparently they're absolutely fucking useless at it. I don't know exactly what they do, but it's just, I mean, this is the problem. It's like you've got people that, and the thing is, it can't even just be about like skills or knowledge. It's like you have to like, I think you need to be the right fit for the country, really. And I think that's probably why certain, and this is not me being xenophobic, but I just think there are certain people from certain specific nations that just seem to fit in better. That's why I think a lot of like Asians and Southeast Asian people tend to fit in quite well into the UK, because they tend to be quite, I think we've got a lot in common with them. We're quite reserved, quite introverted in many respects, and we're quite conservative, I think, quite reserved individuals. Whereas I think some people from certain parts of Africa or certain parts of the Middle East, they tend to be a bit more kind of extremely loyal to their own countries, to their own sense of identity and all that kind of stuff. That's all good and well, but it's like, well, what are you doing here then? Like, it's like I don't know. It's like, to me, it can't just, if you're going to build some kind of a sense of a cultural, societal identity, then it can't just be purely about, it can't just be purely based on, as far as like citizenship and integration. It's like, it can't just be about, you've got the right job, you've got the right skills, you've got the right education. It's like, well, yes, those are all great things, but I just think we're going to have to start becoming a bit more pickier. Saying we don't particularly want immigration from these countries for these reasons, and we do want immigration from these countries for these reasons. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. It's our nation. We should have the right to decide who we want and who we don't want come into the country, based on a very strict criteria, and based on issues with, after certain studies, we can look at the data on certain ethnic minorities in the country and say, well, these communities have posed a particular problem into this country in terms of integration and crime and things like that. And these countries haven't. So, and I'm not for 1 second suggesting that, well, everyone has to walk around with a bloody Union Jack attire or something like that. I just mean that, like, well, first of all, I think everybody should have to speak English to a good level, really. It can't just be broken English. It should be to a point where people can actually genuinely have an actual conversation, and they can speak the language. I'm not saying they have to be absolutely 100% fluent, but like, English is not an easy language for people from certain countries, because it's not a tonal language for starters. It's an extremely diverse language in many respects. A massive amount of vocabulary that you can learn. The grammar is a bit complicated here and there, so I don't expect everyone to be able to speak it perfectly, because I can't speak Thai perfectly. I don't know Thai vocabulary or Thai grammar and things like that, but I at least try to make an attempt to study it to the best of my ability, and I think that's what that's a respectable thing, and I think as long as you can, let's say you can, and I think you should, and I think also you should have to speak the language out in public, in my opinion. Whatever language you speak with, behind closed doors, that's up to you, whatever. But I think in public, you should have to speak the same language, because that builds a sense of belonging. That builds a sense of identity of a collective. That builds a sense of, yeah, we're all bonded by something here. And I think that's important. And I think that's what's lacking in the UK, is that we don't seem to have this. I don't think we quite have really anything that really bonds people together, as far as like people from different cultures are concerned, and the local native population. I don't really think there is. I mean, okay, you might say things like football, but well, not everybody's into football, so I don't know. I think there's gonna have to be some. I think there needs to be new festivals, new kind of holidays or something that builds communities together. We build a sense of national identity. It's like nobody has to be exactly the same. Obviously, that's preposterous. That's obviously it's ridiculous. That would never ever work. But we need to unite the nation. We need to unite the country somehow on a set of principles and a set of values that we all abide by, that we all believe in, and a sense, some kind of shared collective identity again. It's not just about sports, or I don't know. It's like it has to be something that's like deeply ingrained into the culture of the society there. And I think that's what's missing. That isn't there now. Whereas I think at one time it used to be there. And I think it's just been gradually diluted over the decades, if it was ever really there to begin with. I think we've basically got to get very, very disciplined and strict and say, this is England. This is predominantly a Christian nation. Now, you don't have to go to church. You don't have to believe in Jesus or anything to do with Christianity, but you have to respect that this is a Christian country for the most part. At least that's the religion that the vast majority of religious people in the UK believe in, and also a lot of immigrants are Christians as well. People that have set up, people that were first or second generation immigrants. A lot of those people were Christians as well. So that's important to say, and I think that people should respect that. It's like nobody's forcing anybody to believe in anything or to go and attend a church or any kind of Christian building or anything. But it's like, what I would say is that I personally think that we need to kind of put an end to this expansion of. I just don't think that mosques and temples and things should outnumber Christian buildings, in my opinion. Now, that might be a controversial thing for some people to think about, but I don't think that any religion should dominate over over the religion that essentially established the country in many respects. At least as far as the country's kind of modern kind of characteristics in many ways. Because it's not just about the churches, it's about principles of fairness, I think. It's about principles of things like fair game, fair play, and doing the right thing, doing the moral thing, trying to be kind and generous and helpful, and I'm not saying that all of those things that's uniquely Christian, but I'm just saying that there are things that are attached to aspects of Christianity, and we have to we have to appreciate that regardless of what you think about Christianity, we've all got our own opinions on it. I'm not a practicing Christian or anything like that, but I respect that England is still a predominantly dominated Christian
society in terms of architecture, its religion, in terms of a lot of kind of the ways that we kind of, I suppose in many ways it's, I think a lot of it's kind of subconscious really, but just kind of just a general way we try to treat each other really. We try to treat each other with tolerance and respect, and that's all good and great, but I think there come a point where it's just not enough. It's like sometimes you have to put your foot down and set up boundaries and say, this is our country. It's like, you can say whatever, you can think whatever you want about it, but if you're gonna criticize it openly, and if you think you're gonna come to the country and try to dominate with your own religion, and talk shit about the culture and society, then you're more than happy to fucking pack your bags and fuck off. You're more than happy to leave if you want. No one's forcing you to stay. If you want to go, go. Just as if I went to an Islamic nation or a Hindu nation or a Buddhist nation or whatever. It's like I have to respect that that's the way things are there, and that's how it should be in England. It's like you should respect that that's how things are in that country, and I accept that the country is more of a kind of secular society these days, a kind of more liberal leaning society. But let's not pretend that it's not that it's not still rooted in Christian history or the development, let's say, of Christianity, thanks to the impacts of ancient Rome and all that kind of stuff. And I just think that the people should come into the country and respect that is how it is there. And if you don't like it, then it's like, well, then go elsewhere then. Go somewhere where you feel is more suitable for your needs, your philosophical or theistic kind of deep-seated kind of beliefs or ideas or whatever about life and whatever. It's like, go elsewhere then. It's like if I don't like where I live, I'll leave. I'll go elsewhere, or at least I'll try. And some people say, well, yeah, it's not that easy. Well, do you know what? Well, then you have to make two choices then, don't you? You either sit there and tolerate the country that you live in, or you make a plan and you save money and you do what you can and try and move elsewhere somehow. That's it. Those are your only two options, really. It's like, either embrace the country that you live in or leave it, go elsewhere. Because there's no point you being somewhere where you're not happy, where you don't feel fulfilled, and you don't feel that you have any identity with the people that are part of that country. Then you need to go elsewhere then. But I also respect the fact that that it's not quite as we don't really have much of a kind of mono. I think over the last sort of 20, 30 years, this sort of monoculture has really been massively demolished and destroyed, and everyone's been made to feel guilty about, the ills of colonialism, the ills of the white man, and, the white guilt's been shoved down everyone's throats, and over the last 10, 15 years, you've had, ever increasing woke kind of ideology, really for the last 20 years. Extreme leftist liberal ideas have kind of dominated everything, and woke has really it's kind of been the final nail in the coffin, really. But at the same time, Christianity's popularity has been declining as far as church membership's concerned. So we also do have to confront that fact as well. But I think, so, the way around this is to get people back into the church, for those that do believe or want to believe in the church again, then we've got to build trust. And I think this really all comes down to community. It comes down to community building and, how do we get the trust and respect back from the public in terms of our, the predominant religious domination of the country, in terms of building trust and connections with the council, with the local authorities, with the government. It's like that's going to take time, and I don't see any particularly easy solutions to those things, but it will take time, and I think without really, that's at the heart of it. It's like, if you can't build trust and respect and understanding, then everything's going to crumble. Nothing's going to pan out. Nothing's going to work, because you can have all the policies and ideas in the world, and they might all be very good, very efficient, very effective things that pan out. But if you've got no trust and respect between one another, you've got nothing. There's nobody believes in anybody. Everyone's suspicious and paranoid, and it just doesn't work. It just won't work. I'm not anti-immigrant or xenophobic. It's like I'm living here in Thailand. It's like I'm not anti-immigrant. I'm just anti-corruption. I'm anti-exploitation. I'm anti people trying to exploit the system and trying to, dictate the rules for everybody else, even though they've got, they're a small minority. It's like you can have your rights, you can have your say, but it's like, well, yeah, but it's like at the end of the day, especially if people have only just been there, and have only just entered the country, have only been there a short while. It's like, who the hell are you to start trying to dictate the rules and tell everyone how they should live their lives? It's like, you came here. It's like, you came to our country. It's like, you're not in your country now. This is a different place. It's like, if you want to dictate the rules, I think you can, or live a life that you deem to be more fit for your purposes, then fuck off back to your own place. Like, go back to your own lands, your own culture, your own society. Like, don't come here. If you're willing to respect the law and abide by the law and accept that this is how things work here, you're more than welcome, as long as you come legally. You get the right visa, you get the right documents, you've got something to provide, you work, you pay your taxes, you're law abiding, as I said before in other videos. I don't give a shit, really. I don't mind. It's quite nice to meet people from different countries. You can learn a lot, and it's interesting to try different cuisines and get different perspectives on things, and that's all good and great. I don't have an issue with that at all. But again, there comes a point where you have to say, it's like, well, that's all good and great, and it is, but at what expense? What's the sacrifice here? Like, what is the indirect damage of this stuff? I'm not saying that all those people, or even any of them necessarily, are to blame, but it's not those people that I have a problem with. It's the people that come in, break the law, whether they've come illegally or legally, and start thinking that they can call the shots. Start playing victimhood. Start playing the whole like guilt bullshit. Thinking that because the left supports them, that somehow they're superior to everybody else, that they can be dictatorial, that they can intimidate and pressure the government, or pressure people into submission, or pandering to them. And there's all of this sort of political posturing bullshit that's been going on for the past few years with, the whole thing with Israel and Gaza and all that crap. It's like, it's not, it's all good and well to allow people to protest, but it's like, what the fucking hell? What's it got to do with what's that got to do with the average person in the UK? It's like, if you want to go and if you're so outraged by all of this stuff, it's like, why don't you go over there then? Why don't you go there and write emails, call people, join groups, join some kind of political group or something, where you could indirectly make a difference. It's like, why are you going on the streets? It's just, all it is really, it's just posturing, it's political posturing, it's cultural posturing, it's overcompensation for insecurities, identity crisis, and just these people preying on exploiting the victimhood status, you know, pulling out the race card whenever it suits them, you know, playing on this, oh well, yeah, but we're minorities, we're persecuted, we're scapegoated. It's like, no, we're not. You're just exploitative opportunists. That's all you are. Trying to use the system against itself, kind of thing. It's like you're trying to manipulate do-gooders into giving you more and more rights and more power and more privileges than everybody else, even though you don't deserve them. And even if you do, it shouldn't be about one particular group based, you know, it's not, you can't just purely, it's like, you know, well, you're an ethnic minority, so therefore you deserve more rights and attention than everybody else. Like, so it's like, if you don't want to be an ethnic minority, go to a country where you're not a minority. Go to a country where you're the majority. If you're that insecure, if you feel that powerless or unseen or whatever it is, it's like, well, then fuck off then, go somewhere else then. It's like, fucking stop with the waving of the flags and, you know, all of this intimidatory bullshit. Then fuck off somewhere else. Go to somewhere else where you're not a minority. If it's that bad for you, go elsewhere. You know, I'm just so sick and tired of hearing these fucking types of people. You see them on the media all the time, you know. Usually some you know, either some ethnic minority or, you know, so it's something to do with politics, or something to do with, you know, the ills of British history, the ills of British colonialism, you know, the ills of the white person, you know, white culture. It's like, well, like if you feel so strongly about those things, then why are you there? Like, I mean, it can't be that bad, can it? I mean, surely if it was that bad, then you would leave. But what it really comes down to is that they've manipulated their way into positions of authority, of power, of influence, and they get paid large sums of money, or they get paid well, or at least they get the attention, which is what these people seem to lack, apparently. And that's what it's about. These people just want to be on TV. They want to have their voices heard more than everybody else, because they think they've got some special rights because they're black, or they're disabled, or they're an ethnic minority, or because, you know, their country was affected by colonialism, you know, decades ago. It's like, I just wish these people would just fucking grow up. Seriously, like, just fucking grow up. Yeah, if you hate the country you live in, don't like the language, you don't like the culture, you certainly don't like the people, apparently, then fucking do one. Do one already. Do us all a fucking service and just fuck off. Because we don't want you. We don't want people like you. I'm not saying that England's a perfect country. Far from it. But you know what? Compared to some places, it's a lot better than a lot of places. I'm not saying that the country doesn't need reform. As I've said throughout this video, it's bleedingly obvious that it doesn't. And not just because of immigration. Just in every area of the country just needs massive reform. Because it's, in many ways, the country it just doesn't work anymore. Nothing's working. Everything's run down. Everything's broken. Everyone's depressed and miserable. And it's more divided now than it's ever been. When I was growing up, it wasn't like it is today. Nowhere near. The country's massively changed in my lifetime. I almost don't even recognise it anymore. You know, we still had a sense of national pride. of civic pride when I was young. Even when I was in my early 20s, it was still like that. And just, more or less of the last 15 years, it's just gone right down the shitter. Really has gone just absolutely. It's just fucked. It's just being hollowed out. There's nothing left really, and everything's gotten shitter anyway. Rugby, football, music, festivals, you name it. It's like just shopping. Just cultural in general. TV, comedy, movies. Yeah, it's just the way that people are interested in themselves these days. Everyone's just got this very uptight kind of, I want to say the right thing all the time. I don't want to upset anybody. I'm paranoid about being labelled this or this or this. And everyone's just completely on edge now. That's what I've noticed. Everyone just seems to be on edge all the time. And, like the last time I was there in England, like every time you go out now, it's like it's like within 5 or 10 minutes you're hearing a language that you don't understand. And it's not about the language, it's about the fact that we're allowing people into the country that don't deserve to be there, that shouldn't be there, that have no right to be there for the most part. And there's a reason why they're talking their own languages on public transport, because they know that it pisses other people off. That's why they do it. Or it's because they don't know how to speak, because they can't speak English. Or the person that they're talking to doesn't speak English. Like I said, as far as I'm concerned, you should be speaking the language of that country when you're out in public. Whatever language you speak with behind closed doors in your own personal time, or with people of your own community, in your own little space, whatever. I don't give a fuck. But out in public, you should speak the language of that country as far as I'm concerned. We should put our foot down and say, look, this is how we want people to live in this country. No ifs, no buts. You either abide by the law here, you either respect the way of life, you either respect the way that we want people to do things in this country, or you can go. You don't have a right to be here. You have been given, you have been given, you are a privileged individual because you've been given an opportunity, a chance to live in this country. You don't have but that doesn't mean you're guaranteed to stay there forever. As far as I'm concerned, it's like you've been given you're a guest, basically. You're just a guest unless you've got citizenship. But even then, even if you've still got citizenship, a lot of people don't feel any sense of loyalty to England or the UK. And why would they? Because there's nothing there for them. They don't connect with anything in that country because they didn't grow up there. They don't belong there. They don't see any real. It's like that's why so many people leave the country after a period of time. That's why so many people go on holidays so many times a year, because they find it boring. They find the place boring, and it is boring. It always was boring. But you know what? It is our country, But you know what? We made the best of it. That's why we became good at music and art and fashion, and that's why we got so good at things like football and rugby and cricket, because that gave us something to do, and we bonded over it. It's like you go to any football match or rugby match or anything like that, it's tennis or anything, and we're all different people, but for that hour or so, we all feel connected by something. We're all bonded by something, and that's the problem. So many people don't do things like that. There's not enough in the country, I think, to bond people together. And most people don't want to integrate. They don't want to bond, even if there were more things for them to do. They don't care. They're not interested. They want to stay in their own little clique, their own little subcultural, little Afghanistan, little Iraq, little India, little Pakistan, whatever it is, little fucking, I don't know, whatever, some other fucking godforsaken place that, let's face it, the way that most people live their lives in those countries, as far as like the way that they view women, the way that they view children, their views on morality and things like that. It's like they're vastly different to people in the UK, vastly different. And on those grounds, if I had my way, I would say stamp refused, stamp refused, stamp refused, stamp refused. You know, I would just say, look, I would have 20 things that would be the criteria that, you've got to speak English, you've got to somehow integrate into the country, improve it, you have to have a review every so many years. You've got to take a series of tests. You have a background check, a mental health check, physical check, and you're tested, and you tested on your capabilities of communicating with people, and just anything and everything that would be needed to assess someone's ability to understand and abide by certain values and principles that we laid out in whatever that document was, the allegiance to the United Kingdom, or an allegiance to the UK, to England or Scotland, Wales or Ireland. We would have to have a series of things where we say, this is the law of the land here. These are the things that we think benefit our society, and we feel would make you an upstanding, good citizen in this country. And obviously, you'd have to have a job. You'd have to prove that you've got legal, actual degree of some sort, documents, education, skills, experience, etc. And based on all and whatever else would be needed to assess someone, you'd have all of those things laid out, and based on that, you would have a yes or no, maybes, and that's it. You would get a yes or a no, and that's it. And if you get a no, then you are, detained somewhere until you're deported wherever. And that's it. And if the answer is no, then the answer is no. That's it. No coming in again a second, third, fourth time. That's it. You either get a yes or a no. We need to have a system that is firm, but fucking damn firm as well. We will be saying, these are the rules here. We are playing fucking games. We're not messing about here. I wouldn't expect the authorities in your country to fuck around if I came in. If they didn't want me in the country, then fair enough. They have the right to decline my application. They have a right to turn me away if they want to. I don't have any kind of universal right, or some I don't have, who the hell am I to think that this entitlement mentality, oh well, I've got a right to be here. No, you don't. If you get a yes, then you're extremely lucky and privileged, and you should see it as an honour that you've been allowed to come into the country. And the moment that you break the law, there should be a free strike warning. I think I think there should be for anybody, regardless of whether you've got citizenship or not. There should be a kind of like a kind of monitoring period. Let's say 5 to 10 years. And let's say after 10 years, you face the repercussions of that everybody else in the country does. But let's say those first 5 years, maybe it's like, well, but then people will say, well, yeah, but if people got to adjust to the country. Yeah, but, I mean, come on, 5 years? It's long enough. I would say there's a free strike rule. Your first warning, the first time you get a warning, the second time you get arrested, and you get, so many points on your application, or on some kind of system or something that's connected to people that have been applied for asylum, have got citizenship, whatever, applying for it. And on the third one, that's it. Then your asylum claim gets denied, or your application, whatever it is, gets denied, and that's it. And that also applies to people who come in legally as well. Whether it's a student visa or coming to work. There's a free there's a free. What the hell am I trying to say here? It's a free strike system, basically. You get a warning, then you get arrested, you get points, or you get some kind of black note or something put on your next to your name, your status as a immigrant into the country or whatever. And on the third one, you get deported, and that's it. That's how I think it should be. Now, I'm not saying it should be anything like something ridiculous like dropping a bit of litter on the floor, but then again, I don't know. It would have. But then again, if we're going to go down the road being strict, then maybe it should be strict. We should treat. But then again, you'd have everybody complain. Maybe it wouldn't be something like petty, but it would. If it was something serious, like I don't know, like theft or assaulting someone, or ended up in prison or something, then it's like I think then you have a right then to say, look, you've had a chance here. We've given you a chance. We've given you, you had 5 years to prove yourself. You had 5 years to sort yourself out here, and you didn't, and you blew your chance, and that's what we should do. We should just say, look, we'll give you a chance because we are a generous, kind, and welcoming nation for the most part, but we're also strict. We're also firm. Because we don't want the country to be what it was in the past. We want to move forwards here, and the way we do that is by setting boundaries, is by setting deterrents, is by laying down the law that people understand and either respect, or they face the full consequences of the repercussions of their actions. Like I said, you don't have a God-given right to stay in a country that you weren't born in. Unless you get citizenship and you've proven yourself in that country, then I suppose you could say, well, fair enough. You've established yourself. You've got, especially if you've got a career and you've abided by the law. It's like, you've paid your taxes. You haven't done anything, majorly wrong or anything like that. Then fair enough. Whatever you got, then okay. But even still, I would say that, I suppose there comes a point though, even with people that have been there legally, that have got citizenship, we could say, well, what if they go on to commit terrorism or serious crimes? And I would say that the punishment for those things would should be severe, just like anybody that commits serious crimes. You should get, for terrorism, you should get a minimum of 40 years, I think. 40 years in prison, if not a lifetime. And for any other major crimes, it should be at least 20 to 25 years. And you should have things put against your name. And I think probably for serious, really serious crimes, even if you've got citizenship, you should have your citizenship revoked, and then the authorities should have the right to remove you from the country. You are a threat to that nation. You're a threat to its nation's security and members of the public. And so you've proven yourself to be an enemy of the state. So you should be blacklisted and you should be banned from ever coming to the country again. And if you ever do try to come to the country again, then you get imprisoned for life. Or you get deported and fined. And that's it. And so I think going forward, we need to say, this is our country, these are our rules, no exceptions, no little, offshoots of, little communities living lives in the way that they see fit, whether it's based on, cultural, religious grounds or whatever. We basically say, look, what you do behind closed doors in the comfort of your own home, as long as it's legal, you're not doing anything wrong, not doing anything morally wrong, I suppose. Certainly nothing, sickening or nothing, nothing bad. Then whatever, fair enough. But I really do think we should bring an end to. I think we should say, look, we get to decide in this country what can and can't be done. When I go to your country, I don't have a right to dictate the rules or dictate suggestions or improvements to your country, whether it's based on certain practices or the ways that you do things politically, or the ways that you deal with crimes or punishments, or your treatment of this particular set of society, whatever it might be. That's your country. you know, whatever, that's your country, you do whatever the fuck you want to do. I don't have any say in it, I don't have any skin in the game. It's got nothing to do with me. Because it's your nation. Whatever. I might not like things about your country, but this is what I knew certain things when I came here on a holiday, or I came here to live here. So I'm not going to start rocking the boat, probably because first of all, I'm going to end up with a death sentence or a lifetime imprisonment. So I'm not going to bother, am I? But you know, that's the thing. At least in some countries, you can say, well, you know, at least you know where you stand, and at least they aren't messing around. It's like, yeah, I don't agree with how morally bankrupt certain countries are with regards to their treatment of women and minorities and things like that, of course. But at least at the very least, you know where you stand. You know not to bring drugs into the country. You know not to do certain things because you know what the punishments are, and they aren't messing about. They're serious. Like places like Singapore and, you know, parts of Africa, and, you know, even parts of Eastern Europe, Russia, South America, you know, they aren't messing about. You know, they're not fucking around. They mean what they say, and that's what we need to be in England. Either come here illegally, or don't bother coming at all. Because if you do come here illegally, you're going to face the full force of the authorities. You're going to feel the full force of the consequences of coming here illegally. And if I had my way, I would say, if you enter the country illegally, I would say this: if you're willing to break the law, then by these means, you're probably willing to break the law in other means. If you're willing to risk your life, then you probably wouldn't matter too much to risk your life for other things, because your life doesn't mean that much to you, apparently. Because if it did, you wouldn't have bothered. You wouldn't come here. But then again, some people say, well, yeah, but it could be the other way around. Well, do you know what? Then you should do things legally. Then we'll say, well, yeah, but it's not always that easy. Well, do you know what? That's not our problem. That's not the average British taxpayer's problem. And yet it's those fucking people who are footing the bill for these bastards. So why is it fair on them? Why is it their responsibility to take care of the fucking rest of the developing and third world? Well, how is it their fault? What's it got to do with them? Yeah, but their great grandparents, well, you know, it's like, well, that's got nothing to do with the average Brit living today. We had nothing to do with it. I had nothing to do with it. I don't support colonialism of any sort. I don't support racism. You know, I don't support any kind of demonization or stigmatization of anyone. All I'm saying is that we need to start putting our foot down and to start having some kind of a sense of fucking pride in who we are again, and saying these are the rules, abide by them, or there are things that will happen to you because of the things that you've done. That way you get more respect in society, because people know that you can't just do whatever the fuck you want. And that's what's happened in England over the last 30, 40 years. And that's also the same with the native population. They've just got away with everything. That's why crime's running rampant, because there's nobody, people know they can get away with things. Why do you think that all the grooming gang thing went on for so long? Because they knew they could get away with it. Because people turned a blind eye. People in high places were involved in it directly or indirectly. And so they knew they could get away with it. Why do you think there's a black market? Why do you think there's an underground? Why do you think there's so much crime going on within certain segments of immigrant communities? Because they know they can get away with it. Because they've got minority special status, you know, and so they know that they can get away with certain things. All I'm saying is we need to put an end to that. The law should be there, applied equally, but also we should say, you know, if you come to the UK, then you are essentially a guest in this country, and I think it's even more disrespectful to break the law than anybody else, because you're in a different place. It's like how dare you come to a different country and start trying to dominate your own values and principles on a country that's got its own set of values and principles. Who the hell do you think you are? And that to me is probably the greatest. You know, the worst part about it is that the people come to the country and they have this entitled kind of, I'm privileged, I should be privileged because I've got this skin color or came from this place or whatever. And it's like, no, you don't. You're not privileged. You're not entitled to anything unless the authorities allow you to be. So either, you know, like I said, either abide by the law. You either come into the country knowing that you have to, you know, with the aim of respecting and abiding by the law fully, or you just don't come at all. And in fact, if I had my way, you know, you shouldn't be just allowed to just rock up on the shores of you know, at Dover. You shouldn't be allowed to. You should have to have you should have to have your asylum stuff done in your own country first before you even step foot into the country. It should all be done from your own place, long before you ever set before you set foot on land, on British soil. And we need to redefine what it is. We need to redefine what it means to be British. What does it mean? What does it mean? Because if we can state clearly what we mean by being English and Scottish and Irish, Welsh, let's say British, like I said in my last video, I don't really like using that word really, because I think it dilutes things, I think it weakens things. But let's say we do keep it for some reason, so it's fucking, you know, it stops the fucking lefties getting their knickers in a twist. Then we need to redefine what it means. Because I don't necessarily think that it's all about language. I think it's like you have to. I think it's about how you behave. You know, Brits aren't so much about what they do. It's about how they think, how they feel, how they react, what behaviour they have. That's what defines somebody really. Yes, of course, you know, the things you do outside of yourself are part of it, but you have to. I think it's more about how you are as a person and respecting the way things are somewhere. You know, tolerance but the problem is ironically we've been too tolerant, we've been too easygoing, we've been too laid back, and that has to stop. Because you know, if it doesn't, then I hate to see what the country's going to be like 20, 30 years down the line. I can't imagine it's going to be anything great. But people will, I'm sure, you know, morons will still keep voting for fucking Labour and the Conservatives, thinking that they've somehow changed and, you know, they're different come 2029, and, you know, everyone will be jumping on the we've got the solution to the immigration problem bandwagon, and people are just delusional. People are just moronic. The vast majority of people are just idiots, as far as I'm concerned, when it comes to, you know, political allegiances. It's just people are just moronic. People think they can trust people. That it's just, you know, time and time again they're just proved wrong, and especially the more established parties. But of course, a lot of people will be flocking to reform to try and deal with this whole thing. And I think slowly but surely, you know, the truth will unravel and the disappointments will set in, and they'll realise that reform can't really do any more than the Conservatives and Labour, probably. And even if they do, it won't be much more. I think that, and even if they could, I mean, so what? I think that the damage of multiculturalism, the damage of the more negative aspects of these things, I think, are just too ingrained into the country now. And I think deep down, I think a lot of politicians have just said, just fucking let them have it. Just let them have it. Just let the country rot. Let's just manage the decay, basically. It's, you know, the rot is set in. There's no turning this around now. And honestly, I wouldn't blame them if that's how genuine some of them feel. I wouldn't blame them really, because I think, you know, it's like it has to come from the public as well. They have to believe, they have to have hope, they have to get their heads out of their apathetic asses, you know. But then again, they've got to have something to believe in. They've got to have hope. They've got to see that there is a solution on the horizon to this stuff. And as far as I can tell at the moment, you know, reform are just a lot of hot air. They'll say all the right things to try and win the next general election. And maybe they do. But I can guarantee you that they'll probably end up being a huge disappointment. But you never know. I suppose you've got to give them a benefit of the doubt. But I just personally don't think that they're going to be that much better than the mainstream parties, really. I really don't. The only chances, I think, of turning things around in the UK are through UKIP. And I think at some point people will probably start flocking back to UKIP. And I think that would be the wise move. I'm not against people because they don't speak English or because they have a different skin color or because they're not Christians. I'm an agnostic. So I mean, it's like, how am I going to start sitting here judging people? You know, I'd be a hypocrite. I'm not. But I'm just saying that I think we need to have some criteria laid out in the coming years to reinvent ourselves as a country, but also kind of stick to some key principles and values that I think we either have or we want to see come back, or just new things into the culture and society, and bring some sense of our national pride back somehow, and somehow unite the cultures together somehow, rather than everything being segregated, because that's what it feels, and deal with all of the corruption regarding illegal immigration and legal immigration, because there's a lot of corruption going on there as well. That's all my point is. I don't have a problem with anybody, really. I really don't. I couldn't give a fuck what colour your skin is, what language you speak or don't speak. But I do care about integration. I think that is the problem, and we haven't really had any of it, apart from a small minority of certain groups over the past 40 years. I think like a lot of Jamaicans and people of a lot of Asians have integrated quite well, I suppose, in different ways. But having said that, you know, it's like it just feels, it's always kind of felt a very segregated country in my opinion. England, it's always felt like that in my lifetime. But having said that, seemed to be more unity there back in the 90s, noughties, than there has been since the mid-2010s until today. And woke's really not helped. That's really driven a wedge into society and culture. And I think we have to reassert some kind of dominance in terms of our Christian roots as well, maybe to some extent. You know, I think that might be. I don't know how you would do all of these things. I don't know. Even if you can do any of this stuff, it might not be possible. But I think we've got to try. Because if we don't, then I can see England basically becoming extinct altogether within a few short decades. And everybody knows that. People won't admit it, but they know England's finished. They know, at least for the time being, they know it's gone down the pen. They know it's getting worse. But people have got to start putting their head above the parapet. The people have got to start getting their heads out their asses and stop burying their heads in the sand and say, look, we've had enough. We don't want to live in a country like this anymore. We don't want to live in this segregated, isolated, country on identity, or where one section of the communities thinks that it's okay to use violence or intimidatory tactics to try and force the majority into submission, kind of thing. It's like, well, but then again, you could argue, well, would it be okay if the other way around? Well, you know what? If the majority should outweigh the minority, I suppose, especially if it's, the thing is, I understand it's a complex, controversial issue, immigration, and it's not, there's nuances to things, and it's not black or white, but there has to come a point where it's like we just say, well, somebody has to make the decisions, somebody has to make the rules, and not everyone's going to like them, not everyone's going to agree with them. You can't just have, you can't just have anarchy. You can't just have everyone doing whatever the fuck they want. It's like you can't just have, and because if it's going to be segregated, and like I said before, then you might as well just split the country up into zones. It might as well become a prison where it's segregated by colour, by your sense of identity to this particular group of people, because that's essentially what the country is anyway these days. Give or take. People move to an area because they feel more comfortable, because they see people like themselves, or they feel more comfortable with people like themselves, and that applies to people who are white, who are black, who are Asian, who are Middle Eastern, whatever it is. We are a tribalist species, and I think that's probably the direction that we need. And I don't like saying that because I know it's a controversial thing to say, but I think we do need to start heading towards more tribalism, more of a sense of unity. If we can't all come together, which I don't think is possible anyway, because too many egos get in the way, too many allegiances to religious dogmatic beliefs and all this crap, then it's like, then let's just not even bother with that utopian idealistic bullshit. Let's just go straight to tribalism. Let's just say, you know what, we tried the whole multiculturalism thing. It was a failed experiment. Didn't really work. Yes, some good things came of it, but you know what? In the long term, it wasn't worth it. We sacrificed ourselves. We destroyed our own sense of identity, culture, society, everything and everything. We destroyed it. We sacrificed our own everything about ourselves. And let's just fucking throw it all away, and let's just become a tribalistic country. Let's just set it up into zones, shall we? Let's just divide it into zones, and then everybody will be happy then. And have a buffer zone where if you want to go and live there where there's a kind of melting pot or whatever. I think that would be probably the solution. And that's I've said it before, but that is my take on it really. That's how I see things panning out. I hope I'm wrong. But I just think that tribalism there's going to be a tribalism kind of resurgence, I think. You're already starting to see it. And I think what's happening in Northern Ireland and America is it's foreshadowing of what's to come in England and the United Kingdom in general, really. I really don't think reform are going to be the solution to any of this stuff. I really don't. I'm sorry to say. I know I know people want to hear that reform's the mighty savior of the immigration issue, whatever, but it's not. It won't be, because they're deep down they're kind of left leaning themselves. So I would say, don't put all your faith in reform, and be prepared for tribalism. Pick a side at some point, I suppose, as much as I hate to say it, because I think that's what's coming. Call me pessimistic, call me defeatist. I'm not without hope, but I think, like I said in my video, that as I type my videos, there's still hope, but I think that as time goes on, that hope is starting to dwindle. You know it. You know the truth. You know yourself the truth. Okay, you've probably seen it in your own country. You know how you can see how this is going, unless things are mitigated against in the coming years, decades. We all know how this is going to pan out if things don't get dealt with soon. We both see it. I don't want to be the bearer of bad news, but I just don't really see how this is going to pan out in any real positive utopian like way. I just don't. I really don't. I hope I'm wrong.